Thank you. The next question concerns hillside woods. We'll start with the slate on my left. The county has announced a deer culling at Ward Pound Ridge. We have to do something about the deer here. What do you propose?
It's an interesting question.
Talk loud.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Loud.
Oh, me? Okay.
Has to be loud.
Let me bring this in. That's usually not my problem. It's an interesting question. I've actually spent a fair amount of time talking to various people in the village about this. And some of our local experts, who I will not mention but are sitting in the front row, have expressed views. I've also talked to a good friend of mine who is an archer, and he doesn't hunt, but he does archery with people that do. And there is a division amongst people about the best way to deal with this issue. And the problem is that when you start confining deer to a very small area, which is what happens when we have overdevelopment, they start to reproduce even more than they would naturally in the wild as a means of protection. And we would have to cull, I believe, about 80% of the herd initially, and then 40% a year in order to keep the deer down to what is considered a manageable population. The problem we have is we don't know how big the herd is right now, and we need to find that out, or else we won't know how many we need to cull. So there are two ways to do this. We could do this through hunting, and if that was the case, it would have to be done by certified specialist people who demonstrate an incredible proficiency in this. There have been examples in the village recently of deer running through the village with arrows sticking out of them. This is totally unacceptable. There is also the possibility of fertilization or an infertilization program. We would need to investigate the best way to deal with this issue and then move forward.
Thank you.
I think Jim actually and I are in accord on this. I think it's important for us to understand that deer in this village is actually a health issue, first and foremost. While I resent the mowing down of my hostas, what is truly bad is the number of people in this village who have had Lyme disease, and that includes my daughter, mother, and dog. Let's set aside the risk to cars, which includes my Windstar on Ravensdale and Rosedale in broad daylight, and then the damage to personal property, and not incidentally and rarely mentioned, but actually a very big deal, the damage to the understory in hillside woods. For some reason, perhaps a fear that there be some sort of reaction against the discussion of culling, we have to date avoided dealing with what is unfortunately what we will have to do. I think there's an increasing understanding of the seriousness of this problem. Jacques Padouar, who is in the front row, helped author a document that will be distributed shortly, which will lead to a consensus building in the villages around us as to how to deal with this. It's not something we can do in isolation. We've got to do it with other villages so that this doesn't become something that returns the next year. Deer move from location to location, and if we don't deal with it as a town, we won't really be addressing it. So it sounds like we're in accord, and I think there's a large majority out there who agree.
Would you like to rebut?
I'd just like to add two observations. First of all, the human cost of an overpopulation of deer is beyond question, especially to me. I'm one of those people who have had Lyme disease. But it's also a threat to our ecosystems because the overpopulation of deer also hurts the natural setting in which they live. Hillside Woods in particular is a fairly fragile ecosystem. It's a glacial park just hanging on the edges of rocks. An overpopulation of deer is really deleterious to the environment. And I'm glad that the villages are working together on this. And of course, the county health department and the state health department are also in a position to aid at the very least with information and hopefully coordination of strategies, because as we all know, when we're dealing with deer, they can take over large geographic areas quickly, so large entities have to work together.
Thank you.
Bruce?
I think we're in basic agreement here. I simply like to add one point, which is sort of looking down the road. We clearly have to control the deer population that's in Hastings and in our area. I don't fully understand the dynamics of deer migration. I suspect that a lot of the population comes from the reproduction of those who are already here, but there's also probably some in-migration of the herd. I think to try to solve this problem in the long run, we ought to get to the root of its cause. We ought to work with the region and with other communities upstate in Connecticut and so forth to try to control the sprawl, control the destruction of the habitat of the white-tailed deer, which causes this migration, which has caused this problem in the first place, and get them back into settings where they belong, where their natural predators can also be. I don't think anybody really wants to introduce wolves and mountain lions into Hastings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.